Indeed. Let's go back to politics now. Joining me now is Jason Reed. He's a political commentator. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
Always good to see you, Jason. Let's start, shall we, with the cost of living. I mean, clearly, again, this is dominating all the front pages. We've heard today, and one of the accusations I've levelled at the government is there is no one in charge right now. It seems to me like a rudderless ship. There is a void. Now, today, Nadhim Zahawi, the Chancellor, says that actually they are working on a suite of packages so the new Prime Minister can come in and have a sort of off-the-shelf, ready package to help people who are struggling.
I think it's probably true that there is no one in charge, but unfortunately that's kind of the way it has to be. I think it would be quite wrong if people in government now who know that they are only there until the next Prime Minister comes in and appoints their own cabinet, if they went out of their way to start doing things they've always wanted to do that they don't really have a mandate or don't really have the authority to do. And so actually it's quite sensible to be preparing as much as you can for when the next government comes in, so that they can hit the ground running and get going straight away. I think if we were going to accelerate a solution to this crisis, the sensible thing to do might be to cut down the length of this leadership contest so that the new Prime Minister can be installed quickly, because we all know effectively what's going to happen now. It seems overwhelmingly likely. Well, it's true that a lot can happen in a few weeks, but I think it would take something quite extraordinary for the Conservative Party to change its mind and now throw its weight behind Rishi Sunak. It does seem like Liz Truss is going to be the next Prime Minister. Everyone is operating under the assumption that she will be the next Prime Minister. People are starting to speculate about who she might put in her cabinet, and we hope that the people who are being effectively placeholders right now will leave the best possible situation for her to inherit, with lots of plans ready to go. She's already said she will have an emergency budget as soon as she comes into office. I think it would be sensible, given the scale of this crisis that we're heading towards, to cut down the length of time a little bit, especially since the vast majority of party members have been sent their ballots already.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I've been saying it all week. I just think the whole thing is ridiculous. And the fact is, I'm just looking at the timetable now. So we had Cheltenham, I think, on... that's today, right? And then there isn't another hustings till the 16th in Perth, then Northern Ireland. And in Manchester, you've made a great point. They've had their ballots. Many people have voted. Let's get on.
Absolutely. And in an ideal situation, of course, it would be great for the different candidates to visit, every city and every town in the UK if they had time. But we're in a crisis. We're in an emergency. It's only going to get worse the more time we allow to pass. And realistically, in the modern world, even if you live in one of those cities that's still waiting to have its hustings, you will have already seen lots of other debates and hustings that the candidates have taken part in. You already know what the positions are. There's no reason now to wait a little bit longer, because every day we wait is another day that we're behind in our response to this crisis, and people will just suffer as a result of that.
I think there's more to it than that, actually, and the question I've asked our viewers this afternoon is, do you think this can get any dirtier? I mean, every single day something happens, so they're now really mudslinging. Jenny said they should chuck cowpats at each other, because it has got down to that kind of it's a knockout sort of feel to this contest. But in terms of what they're doing, we're now seeing U-turns from Truss, from Sunak, and it's becoming very personal, I think, very bitter, very unedifying. And I wonder how the party can actually reunite when they distance themselves from the current government, even though they're in it.
Well, the new leader, when they become Prime Minister, will have an enormous challenge on their hands to unite the party, not least because if it does end up being Liz Truss, let's not forget that Rishi Sunak was the strong favourite among MPs, whereas Liz Truss, it seems, is going to be the strong favourite among party members. And so you've got almost a repeat of the Brexit dynamic we've seen over the last few years, where people versus Parliament, the people in the country want something quite different to what the MPs wanted. And so Liz Truss is going to find it very difficult to keep all of her MPs on side, especially if she does go ahead with this vision of radical tax cut agenda and shrinking the state and all these bold visions that she has, especially in the midst of a crisis. She has shown a willingness to adapt to what's going on. She initially seemed to rule out handouts altogether, as they were called, and now it seems that she's saying you've got to wait and see what's going to happen in the emergency budget. I think that's fair enough. I don't think the campaign trail is the right place to be hashing out, going into a bidding war about who's going to give the most money in the most places. It's much more sensible to set out a direction and a vision, which both the candidates have done, and then iron out the details later once you're in office. But Liz Truss is going to find it very difficult to keep all of her MPs on side. Whatever she does, there are going to be a lot of people within her own party who will be unhappy with it.
I think you make a great point about the fact that actually people are now coming out and supporting one of those candidates, many moving to Liz Truss, I think, for their own reasons. The fact is they know or think she's going to win. I'm looking at the current odds. Liz Truss now on just under 90%, according to the bookies. So they think she's going to win. They're vying for their own cabinet positions. We've seen people like Damien Collins, Gordon Henderson, Henry Smith, James Davies, Mark Fletcher, Nigel Mills, and so on, all saying that actually they're supporting Liz Truss. That's to help their jobs.
Well, it might be true that it's to help their jobs, and being politicians, I'm sure that's not absent from their mind. But at the same time, I think it makes sense in the interests of party unity. You don't want to keep throwing grenades at the person who is likely to be the next leader unnecessarily, and that's something that more and more supporters of Rishi Sunak are realising, and that's something that I think eventually Rishi Sunak is going to have to realise as well. Understandably, in his position, he is at the moment trying every tool in the toolbox. He's trying everything he possibly can, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, and that is resulting in a lot of quite ugly blue-on-blue attacks. But I think it's worth saying that it could be a lot worse. I think the current situation where it seems like the party is starting to unite behind one candidate, at least for the time being, is desirable in one sense. It would be worse in a way if we had 50-50, where half of the party want one thing and the other half want the other, because then whoever comes in, they're not going to have a clear mandate. They're going to find it really difficult, and then you really are in the realms of possibility where the Conservative Party might split, and that would be a really, really big problem for the government. So what's happening at the moment with getting behind Liz Truss does seem at least to be, she will have the authority to be leader and to be Prime Minister if she does win the contest, at least for the next couple of years until the election. So it could be worse, but the situation we're in is not.
I thought there was a really interesting development this morning. I don't know if you saw this, but Simon Clarke, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and Kwasi Kwarteng, basically said that Rishi Sunak had dug his heels in on reforms that were suggested once we had left the European Union. And they talk about two particular rules. The EU Solvency II rule, which is about pension funds, whether they can invest in the infrastructure here in the United Kingdom, but also, for me, crucially, about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. Now, for me, this is really, really giving them ammunition, saying Rishi Sunak did not do what was best for Britain.
Yeah, exactly. Simon Clarke and Kwasi Kwarteng, of course, both very prominent supporters of Liz Truss, both expecting to get plum cabinet jobs if she does win the contest. And there's been a lot of questions asked about Rishi Sunak's Brexit record. We've got this weird situation where Rishi Sunak seems to have the support of the Remain wing of the party, despite voting for Brexit. And of course, Liz Truss the other way around supported Remain in 2016, but has a lot of Brexiteer backing now. But I think what's coming to light is that Rishi Sunak's Brexit credentials are not as strong as he would quite like us to believe. He doesn't appear to have made a huge amount of public appearances during the Leave campaign. He doesn't appear to have been very loud with his support for Leave. A cynic might suggest that he was hedging his bets a little bit, and that now that Brexit, turned out to be the will of the people, that he is saying, oh, don't worry, I supported it all along, even if he wasn't really throwing his full weight behind it at the time. In contrast to that, Liz Truss, since the referendum, has been very consistent in being pro-Brexit, in talking about seizing the opportunities of Brexit and everything like that. And so the party members are finding that to be a much more convincing argument.
I was asked today by a national newspaper to comment on which of those candidates I thought would be better in terms of Brexit. And I found myself in a really rather invidious position for the reasons that you mentioned. I'm nervous about both of them. I'm particularly nervous about Rishi Sunak, given what I've just found out today. And I do wonder whether Liz Truss, at least, as you say, she has some consistency. She's done those trade deals. I think it's okay to change your mind. But I really hope that if she does get elected, that she follows through and ensures that we stop abandoning Northern Ireland and deliver a proper Brexit.
I think it's highly likely that she will do that. She's committed to the Brexit vision, because I think this is more than just accepting the result of the referendum with Liz Truss. I think she has accepted the result, but there's more to it than that. She seems to have genuinely changed her mind as well. She's always had a relatively libertarian worldview. She's always seemed to, during her political career, believe in low taxes in a small state. And it seems in recent years that she's really come around to the ways that Brexit can help achieve that, to the ways that you can deregulate and you can make a stronger British economy outside of the European Union. She's framed her whole campaign around that. It would be extraordinary if she went back on it now, although having said that, Boris Johnson framed his campaign in various ways a few years ago and then ended up changing his mind on various things, especially nanny state issues. But Liz Truss seems she's got obviously the weight of Boris Johnson's legacy. She's under a lot of pressure to not do what he did, to not U-turn, and to have a clear ideology, to have a clear set of principles that she's standing for. And she's made clear throughout this campaign that Brexit is one of those principles that she stands for as a politician. And so I think she's going to be doing everything she can to win over people like you, David, hopefully win your support when she's Prime Minister.
Well, luckily I don't have to vote, obviously, because I'm not a Conservative Party member, and there are only 150,000, we think, if that, actually. Just in terms of, I think it's just got very nasty. Sunak calling Truss's policies Trumpian. Truss says Sunak's policies are policies of envy, and it goes on to say he's never cut a tax in his life. I also wonder very quickly if there is something else going on, and he said something last night which I thought was really fascinating. He said, I would rather lose the contest than make false promises. Do you think this is him sort of admitting he is going to lose, basically softening the blow?
Quite possibly, yes. I think we can expect to see more of that kind of thing from Rishi Sunak over the next few weeks. I think we can expect to see more of him coming to terms with it, realising that as the days pass and the polling numbers don't really change, that he is going to be pitching for a job in government of some kind because he's unlikely to end up with the leadership. And I think that's exactly what you'd expect. I mean, it's fair enough that he's trying everything he can, like I was saying earlier. I think calling Liz Truss Trumpian is wide of the mark, and it's pretty clear that that's not going to convince many people, whereas on the other side, the criticism that he hasn't cut a tax in his life, that seems to me to be entirely fair enough.
Yeah.
That Rishi Sunak is within his rights to campaign to the very end and to try as long as he possibly can. But he's a clever man. He realises exactly what is going on here, and he sees that his vision is not one that the party buys into.
Jason, always a pleasure to talk to you. That's Jason Reed, a political commentator.